In this video here, we're going to be taking a pork butt and turning it into delicious smoked pulled pork. First thing that you need to do here is get yourself a pork butt. I picked this up at a local meat shop here near me, and they sell it in 2 packs. So I'm cooking two pork butts. By no means do you have to do two. This is just what I had on hand. First thing you have to do here is open up the plastic wrap that it's in. I'm just using a standard knife here to cut the bag open so I can start working with the pork butts. Once you got the pork butts out, I like to have a wired cooling rack on top of a cookie sheet. This way it gives me a little more room to work with. Any of the rub that falls off ends up there, and I can potentially reuse it on the raw meat. Once you got it out, the first thing you need to do here now is start wiping it down with paper towel. While you're doing this here, you also want to take a look and cut off any loose fat or any bits and pieces that are just kind of dangling. These are not going to cook properly and will end up burning more than turning into delicious pulled pork. To rub the pork butt down here, I'm using a binder. In my case here, I'm using mustard. Don't worry, for those of you who despise mustard, I am one of you. By the end of the cook, you will not taste the mustard at all. This is just used to help keep the rub adhered to the meat. The rubs here I'm using Malcolm Reed's recipe for his barbecue rub. I'll include a link in the description, as well as a cherry cola rub from Fire and Smoke. I've used the cherry cola rub personally on ribs. It was a little strong, so I wanted to cut it with some actual barbecue rub. Give it the cherry cola flavor with primarily barbecue flavors. One of the biggest things you want to keep in mind as you go through and rub the meat down is you want to rub your binder in so you get a nice even coating of the binder across the surface of the meat. But then for your rub, you want to pat that in. And you want to make sure that you season all sides. Fat cap, don't really need to season, but I'm going to season it anyways because it's going to help with the rendering process, and that flavor will then impart itself through the meat as it cooks. I personally like to prep my pork butts ahead of time, let them sit in the fridge for at least 6 to 12 hours, depending on what time I get them prepped and what time I'm starting my cook in the morning. Next thing I need to do here is start getting the grill going. To get the grill going, I'm going to use some charcoal briquettes. And the way that I measure out my charcoal briquettes of what I need is I use the Weber char-baskets. The Weber char-baskets will hold the coals together, helping give you a nice tight heat zone that you're able to then add to as needed. Additionally, what I found is that one char basket will usually keep the grill temperature at about 250 degrees to 275, which is perfect for smoking most meats. So I'll go ahead and pour the charcoal into the char basket, use it as a measuring cup, then take the charcoal from the char basket and throw it in my chimney. The chimney is nice because I don't have to worry about lighter fluid. I just need to have something laying around, whether it's newspaper, starter cubes, or tumbleweeds, to get that fire going. The way the chimney is designed, it will continuously draw the heat and fire up through the coals, consistently lighting the coals without the need of lighter fluid. As the coals are lighting, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a very thick white smoke. This smoke is not conducive to barbecue. This smoke is too thick and is also called a dirty smoke, resulting in very poorly tasting barbecue. When the coals are good to go and ready to be dumped, you'll see them. They will be red hot and glowing. Some of them will start to ash over, and that is perfect. Once I've dumped the coals in, I then have a spare set of long-handled tongs that I leave out at the grill that I will then grab the hot coals and throw them into the char basket if they missed the char basket as I dumped them. Additionally, at this point, I like to put my water pan in. I'll put my water pan in empty at this moment. I like to put it in there now, so that way I'm not having to deal with a hot grate trying to finagle a water pan in. Once all the charcoal is in the char basket, you will then want to dial in your airflow. I found success with leaving my top vent wide open and leaving my bottom vent open about a 1/4 inch or less. Now, this is just what I've had success with. It doesn't mean that's what you're going to have success with. Once the grill has stabilized at that 250 to 275 mark, I will then take my water for my heat sink and pour the hot water into it. I personally like to boil the water ahead of time. That way, I don't have that much of a drop in temperature in the grill, but this heatsink will help to mitigate any temperature spikes and fluctuation. Once I've got that all set, I'll then put my pork butts in. I am putting the fat side down with the bone facing towards the fire. I'm putting the fat side down to make sure that as the heat hits the meat is not getting burned by the heat, rather the fat cap is taking the brunt of that impact. Additionally, I'm putting the bone towards the heat. I have found success with wireless probes. I will stick the probe on the non-bone side of the meat, which is away from the fire. It'll give me an accurate read of the internal temperature of the meat, as well as a rough idea of what the ambient temperature is inside the grill at crate level.
Alright, so the pork butts have been on the grill now for about 2 hours. Gonna go ahead and get the spritz ready. For the spritz, I'll use, in this case here, some Blue Moon, apple cider vinegar, and apple juice. I'm just going to make it simple, 1 to 1 to 1. 6 ounces of beer, 12 ounces of apple juice, as well as 12 ounces of cider. Give it a nice hefty shake. And in this case here, I got to prime it so it will spray. Get a few pumps. And it's good. Then just spray the meat. Since I put the fat cap on the underside, I don't have to worry about hitting the fat cap. Fat cap is one of those things that you don't want to overly soak, because that's going to help protect the meat as it cooks. And with that fat cap being on the underside, it'll help protect the meat from heat as the heat rises. Additionally, I put bone side towards the fire, as that's where most of the heat's going to be coming from the side as well as the bottom. So now that this has been sprayed down, go ahead and close it back up. Let it rock and roll for another 30-45 minutes. Come back out and spritz and keep checking the temperature periodically. Alright, so the pork butts have been on the grill now, smoking for about 6 hours. They're hitting a stall at about 145, 150-ish. So we're going to get them wrapped up here. So, gonna use aluminum foil, get them wrapped up. This here will hold a little bit more of the heat, as well as some of the moisture in right nice and tight, so it'll help steam and help break down some more of the meat and the interconnected tissues. So, now let's go and get these guys wrapped up and on here. So, for the initial cook, one of the fat side down, so it'll help protect the meat from the heat. Now that they're getting wrapped up, I'm going to put the fat side on top, so as it cooks, some more of that fat from the top is going to render, more of the fat from the fat cap will render down and into the meat and help baste it a little bit as well. There we go. And so, get a little bit of pullback here on the bone from the meat. But if we try and pull the bone here right now, the bone will not pull. Fat is starting to render quite beautifully, starting to turn into a gelatin essentially. So, now that this is getting wrapped up, I'll pour some of the spritz liquid into the foil as well to help put that moisture right on the inside. And again, this is just that beer, apple juice, and apple cider vinegar. So I'll get this wrapped up all nice and tight. And I got a couple loose spots, so I'll go ahead and get another piece of foil and wrap it up tighter one more time. That works quite nicely. So, next thing again, just like before, I want to make sure the bone is facing the fire. I'll take a probe, stick it in on the opposite side. Probe's going to leave a small enough hole between both foil that will not impact the meat hardly at all. Just like that, you're going to stick it right back in. Repeat the process here with the second one as well. Just use the bone as a handle.
As I was editing this video, I realized I forgot to take a couple of videos of me taking the pork butts off the grill and what I did after that. Not much was missed. I just took the pork butts off the grill, put them in an aluminum pan, wrapped them in foil, and then on top of that, wrapped them in towels and put them in a cooler with more towels to help insulate the pork butts. That time sitting in the cooler will help the juices inside the pork to redistribute and give you a more flavorful bite every single time you take a bite of the pulled pork. What I'm doing here is simply removing the fat cap from the pork butt. The fat cap was left on the pork butt to help protect the meat as it cooked from the heat on the underside of the meat. Now that the cook is done, that fat cap has to come off. When you go and shred the pork butt into pulled pork, you don't want large globs of fat in the meat. So I'm going to take off as much of that fat cap as you can. And as you can see, it's coming off real easily, barely any resistance. This here is the ultimate reward for fully cooking a pork butt beautifully. All I've done here is now that the fat cap's been removed, I'm taking the pork butt out of the aluminum that it was wrapped in, pouring the juice that rendered out from the pork butt into the aluminum pan. That'll come back in a second here. But the telltale sign that the pork is done and done flawlessly is the bone pulls out clean. Bone pulls out, no resistance, no meat left on the bone, and that is the telltale sign that you've perfectly cooked that pork butt, and you will have delicious pulled pork.
Bone pulled out clean as can be.
And that might be what you want to show your audience.
Now that that bone has been pulled out, next thing that you need to do here now is start shredding the meat. You can get some bear claws, get a couple forks, shred it that way. I personally prefer to use my hands. I've got my cotton glove liners on with disposable gloves over top. That allows me to get right into the meat and work the meat apart. It also gives me the opportunity to, as I'm working through the meat, ensure that there's no large globs of fat left in from the fat cap, and ensuring that everybody who has a pulled pork sandwich or enjoys my pulled pork gets solid meat and not a glob of fat. As I'm going through and shredding this meat, I like to work as much of that meat into the juice as possible. That means pulling the meat from the bottom so the meat on top ends up in the bottom of the juice, and this way that juice gets distributed throughout the meat as much as possible. And now, just because we season the outside of the meat doesn't mean that we shouldn't also season some of the pulled pork as well. Again, I'm just hitting it with the original barbecue rubs I use, both the standard barbecue rub that I've got, as well as some of that cherry cola.
And now one of the best parts about barbecue, you gotta try your stuff before you serve it to others. Grab a nice piece here. Got a little bit of the burnt edges. Got some of the smoke ring on it. Absolutely delicious.